Dear netizens, many people were not optimistic about the negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine in Saudi Arabia. The United States and Ukraine reached a mutually agreed ceasefire agreement. I remember, was it more than a month ago? I said that within 3 months this war would cease fire. The peace terms might take longer to finalize, but basically, once the ceasefire is in place, they can't attack you. Both sides are working out the detailed conditions. This is very significant good news. Although I still feel that Russia continuing to occupy so much of Ukraine's land is undoubtedly rewarding the aggressor and not punishing the aggressor. But because Russia is a nuclear power, sometimes there are things unavoidable, especially when the United States is not willing to firmly support. But in any case, regarding ceasefire, reducing the casualties in Ukraine, I am in favor of it. On March 11th, Ukraine recently held talks in Saudi Arabia. Simultaneously with United States, proposed a 30-day temporary ceasefire agreement, a temporary halt for 30 days. Then both sides will extend it. This really, I have to say I foresaw it more than a year ago. Ultimately, these wars will end with a ceasefire on the spot. Now the KOLs criticizing Ukraine. And some say there can't be a ceasefire on the spot. They must take territory. People made grand statements. Now they turn around and criticize Ukraine. Does everyone remember what those people said? And I am just discussing the matter as it is. I also know that in the end, it's hard to avoid a ceasefire on the spot. A ceasefire on the spot means Russia doesn't have to give back occupied land. Zelensky said, a ceasefire is to end all hostility. Not only missiles, drones, bombs, but also no fighting on the front lines. Temporarily stopping. Of course, in the future, someone needs to monitor this ceasefire, but temporarily stopping for 30 days is, Zelensky said. This is a positive step, but it requires Russia's acceptance. Tell you the ceasefire problem, the issue of who benefits from the ceasefire. I will continue to talk about it. After the ceasefire, everyone will store up energy, stockpile arms, and mobilize forces. If after the ceasefire, whoever recovers their stamina faster will have the advantage. Whoever can recover their stamina a bit quicker will gain an advantage during the ceasefire. At the end of this video, I will reveal the answer to everyone. The Ukrainian delegation during the talks reiterated that the Ukrainian people desire peace from very first moment and hope to achieve peace. Of course, what kind of peace this is? We have always supported peace. The question is, what are the conditions for peace? This ceasefire proposal is that the U.S. will cut off military aid to Ukraine and stop sharing intelligence. Ukraine would then make concessions. Ukraine has always. Let me first give you the answer here, so everyone doesn't worry. Ukraine has always been unwilling to ceasefire. Because after the ceasefire, Russia, due to its larger population, they would replenish their military forces. Their reinforcements are faster than Ukraine's. So Ukraine feels at a disadvantage. Why is Ukraine willing to ceasefire now? Due to pressure from the United States. Very important is that the EU countries have already promised Ukraine these two things. First, once the ceasefire happens, their aid will continuously flow into Ukraine. That is, in terms of manpower. Although Ukraine cannot match Russia, but in terms of replenishing weapons, they will be faster than Russia because the EU's mobilization capability for military supplies far surpasses that of Russia. The economic strength of the EU is more than 10 times that of Russia, as long as they can make up their mind. Those military supplies can enhance Ukraine's armament capability faster than Russia, because China will only increase dual-use equipment, can't directly supply arms to Russia. Second, how to gain time. The EU to boost its military strength. This is within the time frame, and the EU, not the EU, but Europe, in establishing a reserve army. The formation of this army will take time, and this army will not be stationed in Ukraine, but temporarily placed in Poland, similar locations, to enter Ukraine if necessary. This provides a significant assurance to Ukraine. You all understand? You will see later. What you will see later, the day before the talks, Ukraine launched an attack on Moscow, the largest drone attack. 337 drones, impressive. 91 targeted the Moscow area. This was possible because of Starlink. How command system transmit orders. All right, on the same day, Russia and Ukraine sent 126 Shahed and other drones, as well as a ballistic missile. The U.S.-Ukraine joint statement. Both parties discussed humanitarian aid and its importance in the peace process, including the exchange of prisoners of war and the issue of releasing civilian detainees. So they also discussed some humanitarian conditions, like releasing some prisoners of war, which is actually pointless. Civilian detainee. These things were discussed. Negotiation February 28th. After the big stir that day, officials from the United States and Ukraine had their first discussion. Zelensky has already informed King Salman of his intention to negotiate peace. The first phase sought a ceasefire. Now they are talking about a ceasefire on land as well. Ukrainian President Zelensky apologized to Trump. Zelensky is willing to do anything without compromising personal dignity. It's very important for the country. He formally apologized to Trump because he was willing to make this apology, because the EU has already made significant assurances. He immediately rushed to London. During several summits in London, he received assurances from the UK and France. So these things are not important. What he was fighting for that day was to secure this safety assurance. All right. Agreed ceasefire. End the GOP ban on Ukraine. His ban in Hong Kong. Aid security assistance to Ukraine. Everyone be cautious about the word security. Why security assistance? Means things like artillery shells. Patriot missiles will be supplied, but ground-to-ground missiles will not be supplied. Long-range HIMARS not be supplied to avoid provoking Russia. The use of the word security here implies this meaning. Rubio said the U.S. hopes Russia will respond accordingly. Now the ball is in your court. You respond back. Before the ceasefire agreement, the U.S. had previously suspended military aid to Ukraine, including radar, ammunition, and intelligence sharing. All right, he now needs to clarify because he is under pressure at home. Since when he stopped the intelligence, Ukraine didn't know how to defend against incoming missiles. As a result, Ukraine got bombed heavily. He said it was immediately restored at that time, but it was reduced to intelligence Russian offensives. Only info on incoming missiles, now fully restored. All right, the U.S. and Ukraine have a comprehensive agreement regarding anti-production resources. This agreement, Trump said, looking forward to now negotiating a ceasefire agreement with Putin. He will talk with Putin. It takes two to tango, as the saying goes. One cannot dance alone. Russia must agree. After Trump learned that Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire, he hopes Putin will agree. If Russia agrees, that would be great. I also have to give some credit to Trump for this. I completely understand and agree with everything you've mentioned. Your perspective is clear and makes perfect sense to me. I appreciate the way you've explained it, and I am on the same page with you regarding this matter. It's important to acknowledge the points you've raised, and I am in full agreement with your insights. The representatives attending there were Hem and Rubio. They agree with President Trump's vision for peace. The talks also discussed long-term security guarantees for Ukraine. Specific proposals were made, ceasefire negotiations and details, how to ceasefire and how to monitor. It can be monitored by satellite. Who cannot do what? Putin says he wants a lasting peace plan. A short-term truce cannot just give one side time to catch their breath and then launch another offensive. Putin is concerned. If a ceasefire happens now, the military arms and equipment of European countries recover Ukraine's energy facilities. And because Europe has a lot more money, when they pour money into Ukraine, Ukraine will reset many defense lines. And when the Air Force is replenished, it will be very difficult for Russia to attack Ukraine again. Trump said he hopes this week to talk with Putin over the phone. A ceasefire in the next few days. If a ceasefire is achieved, I would feel relieved. All right, U.S.-Ukraine. Putin has 4 points. Let me repeat them here. First, a temporary ceasefire for 3 days. Second, resumption of aid. Third, jointly discuss long-term security. Fourth point, reach a communist agreement as soon as possible. Zelensky might go to the White House to sign this again. Everyone will be happy. Then, Trump will praise Zelensky again. You know, if Trump is willing to do this, Zelensky will of course flatter Trump. Those who criticize Zelensky harshly. It's actually quite awkward. Elon Musk and Wells are. Zelensky welcomes the agreement. This is an important moment for peace in Ukraine. After 3 years of fighting, this is a helpless ceasefire. Calling on Russia to agree, the French president welcomes it, especially with a ceasefire in 3 days. Once stops, this time it won't return to fighting. Once it stops, it won't return to fighting. Because the EU has made up its mind. It's very difficult for Russia to fight back, especially because the Mirage 2000 fighter jets will continue steadily. You see, they already took off. Ukraine needs time to train Air Force pilots. Long as Russia doesn't have air superiority, it won't be able to attack. Von der Leyen and Costa both said that the Jeddah meeting brought positive progress. Bringing positive progress. The Ukrainian president's office said, Ukraine has shown the world that it wants peace. Those who say Zelensky will keep fighting forever are completely and utterly slandering. I tell you, Ukraine wants a security guarantee. This is the first point. The second point is he doesn't want to lose so many leaders. This is the first point. Russia needs to show whether it wants to end this war. The Paris meeting is currently underway. The Paris meeting. Chiefs of staff from 30 countries are going to jointly discuss how to deploy troops to Ukraine. They won't send troops into Ukraine until an agreement is reached, but they will. In Poland, I tell you, as Poland, Ukraine, including Russia and Romania, has consolidated military forces, forming two armies that can intervene in Ukraine once an agreement is reached, or if it breaks down. The moment Russia continues its attack, they will immediately attack Ukraine, especially providing Air Force support. This army is composed of Air Force, will immediately Ukraine airspace securely. Actually, with just over 200 fighter jets and logistics units, plus some air defense facilities, they can be deployed to ensure Ukraine is immediately in an invincible position. Over 30 countries and NATO members held a meeting in Paris on March 11th. If a ceasefire is reached with Russia, willing to ensure Ukraine's security. This is what they mentioned. This meeting lays the foundation for Ukraine's security assurance. This is a voluntary alliance because NATO simply cannot be used, as it needs to bypass the United States. EU is not a military organization. Some countries may hesitate. Whoever is willing will send troops. This is roughly the situation now. The UK, France, Ireland, Germany will send troops, along with Canada and Australia. Australia as UK sends troops. They will send troops, a force of 50,000 troops needed, especially an air force of 30,000, 2 armored divisions. That would be sufficient. No one would indeed dare to act at all. The international forces deployed France and the UK must have heavy weapons and weapon reserves. Place the heavy weapons properly. 2 armored divisions, well as aircraft and logistics. If Russia breaks the ceasefire, immediately cross the border to protect Ukraine. The United States was not invited because the U.S. said that post-peace security is Europe's responsibility. Now they are taking it on, and it has also led to a rupture. This is a demonstration of force. Actually, as long as Europe deploys this air force in Poland and Romania, Europe and Indonesia, Russia will have to kneel. There's no way to compare with this air force because the British and French forces. The British forces have the F-35. Their air force cannot be compared. Besides NATO members, non-NATO members are involved. Ireland, Cyprus, and Austria also participated. Australia, NZ, Japan, Korea participated remotely. Macron said, only after a peace agreement is signed will European forces sent to Ukraine. To ensure the agreement is fully respected, they stationed this force at the Ukrainian border. They demand that Ukraine's future security be guaranteed by this force. This is the condition for Ukraine's negotiations. This is the condition Russia rejects. Because as long as European forces, this army is stationed in Ukraine, Russia will not be able to attack Ukraine in the future because they can't win. After the armaments enter Ukraine, Ukraine reorganizes military, and with the supply from this force, adding more heavy weapons to Ukraine, Russia will not be able to attack Ukraine in the future, meaning Russia restores its imperial military power. Russia's border has reached the current situation, but Russia can still claim victory because Ukraine will definitely not agree not to join NATO, and they have taken 18% of Ukraine's territory, especially with a green bridge connecting Russia and Crimea. The French Prime Minister and the President of the Parliamentary Group, the French National Assembly, will also have a report regarding a draft resolution to strengthen support for Ukraine. The UK is increasing its military equipment, but not by much. Germany is boosting its military equipment. Germany is preparing a plan worth hundreds of billions of euros to reorganize its military equipment.